Hey there, folks. Thanks for tuning in. Remember to hit subscribe if you're enjoying this story. Let's dive right in. Late in the day, the sun stretched shadows across the Taylor estate's immaculate lawn out in the Hamptons. I stood at the edge of my limestone patio, swirling a glass of scotch, watching the event crew put the final touches on my daughter Emily's engagement party. At 52, I've earned the confidence of a man who's built one of the most respected construction firms in Manhattan from the ground up. "Dad," I heard Emily call out. Her voice carried across the lawn, and I turned to see her. She looked stunning in her champagne-colored dress, her dark hair elegantly twisted up. "The florists need to know where to place the extra arrangements." I grinned and gestured toward the garden entrance. "Wherever your mother planned, sweetheart. This is your day, after all." Just then, Lisa, my wife, stepped out from the house. Her heels clicked against the limestone as she walked. At 47, she still turns heads, but there's a certain hardness in her eyes now that wasn't there back when we met. She scanned the scene with laser-like focus, like a general surveying her troops. "The Andersons called," she said, not even glancing at me. "They're running late, but I told them we're starting at 6 on the dot, whether they're here or not." Then she turned to Emily. "Honey, go check the place settings. The staff seems to struggle with basic instructions." Emily looked over at me, a little hesitant. I gave her a reassuring nod. "Go on. Your mom has a handle on things." As Emily walked off, my son Ryan came outside. He already looked uncomfortable in his suit, even though it was perfectly tailored. At 24, he's a mirror image of me at that age, though he doesn't quite have the same fire that pushed me to where I am today. "The Gleasons just arrived," he said, fiddling with his tie. "Mike mentioned he has some documents for you to sign, Dad." I felt a frown tugging at my face. "Business can wait. Today's about Emily." "It's just a couple signatures," Lisa cut in. "Mike said they're just routine property transfers. Better to get it over with before the guests start arriving." Before I could respond, my youngest, Ava, came running down the steps. "Mom, Mrs. Patterson is upset about her seating. She's refusing to sit at table 6. Lisa's usually calm expression slipped just for a second. "That woman," she muttered before stalking off to handle it, Ava following closely behind. Not long after, I heard the crunch of tires on the driveway. Mike Anderson had arrived, stepping out of his Mercedes, briefcase in hand. He's been my attorney for 15 years. But today he looked a little too polished, his smile a bit too wide. His wife, Karen, followed him, holding a wrapped gift. "Jake," Mike called, his voice booming. "The place looks incredible, doesn't it, Karen?" Karen nodded, mumbling something polite, though I've always thought she seemed a bit afraid of him. Mike clapped a hand on my shoulder, a gesture that used to feel friendly but now struck me as a bit much. "Got those property transfers ready. Just routine stuff, of course." "Let's set it down in my study," I replied. "We can handle it later." Once in the study, Mike set his briefcase on the desk, acting casual but a little too calculated for my liking. "Really, Jake, it's nothing complicated. Just some standard transfers. We could get it done now while it's quiet." I picked up a photo from my desk. It was from Emily's college graduation, all of us smiling, like it was from another lifetime. "Mike, you've been my lawyer a long time, and I always thought of you as a friend. When did that change?" Mike's smile faded, just for a moment. "I don't know what you mean," he said. "But sure, we can handle this Monday. Family first, always." Before I could respond, Ryan entered the room. "Mom wants to know if you're done in here, Dad. Guests are starting to arrive." Mike turned to him, his whole demeanor shifting. "Ryan, how's the internship?" he asked, his tone almost fatherly. "Are you finding it challenging?" Ryan's face lit up. "The partners say I'm doing great." Mike gave him a proud nod. "That's because you're a natural, and because you have good guidance, of course." I watched them interact, taking mental notes on every subtle detail, then said, "We should head out. Emily will want photos soon." The party was in full swing, the sun casting a warm glow over everyone gathered. Moving through the crowd, I played the part of the proud father and the successful businessman, accepting congratulations, talking about market trends, and keeping an eye on my family. I couldn't help but notice how Lisa always seemed to end up near Mike, how their paths seemed to cross a bit too often. Ryan, meanwhile, hovered around Mike's group, laughing just a bit too loudly. Even Ava, usually glued to her phone, kept glancing between her mom and Mike with something like nervous excitement. Then one of the waiters came over, holding a phone. "Mr. Taylor, there's an urgent call from the Beijing office." I stepped away from the crowd, heading to the quiet of the Rose Garden to take the call. It was brief, just a small issue my team could handle, but as I hung up, I heard voices drifting over the hedge. I crept closer. "It's all coming together perfectly," Lisa said, her voice low. Then I heard Mike respond, followed by the sound of a kiss. They started talking about legal documents, transferring properties, things in their names. My stomach twisted, but I held still. Ryan and Ava's voices joined in. My own children, scheming behind my back, referring to Mike as their real dad. I moved away, silent as ever. As I walked up to the group, I could see Mike and the others wearing confident smiles, but they flickered a bit when they saw me. Mike put on a friendly face and asked, "Everything all right, Jake? You seemed a little off earlier." I returned his smile, feeling a new sense of calm that they wouldn't understand. "Never been better, Mike," I replied, meaning every word, though not for the reasons they thought. By Monday morning, I was back in my office on the 48th floor, looking out over the city. The weekend's events had hardened my resolve, and my mind was crystal clear. I knew exactly what needed to happen next. My assistant, Janet, knocked and stepped in. "Mr. Taylor," she said, "the State Bar Association's Ethics Committee is on line 1, and Marshall Summers has already arrived. He's in the conference room waiting for you." I nodded. "Thank you, Janet. Please hold all other calls." I picked up the phone, setting my voice in a calm, steady tone. "Mr. Davidson, thank you for taking my call on such short notice. I have serious concerns about Mike Anderson's misconduct, and I wanted to make sure you had all the necessary information." The committee chairman, Davidson, answered, sounding serious. "Mr. Taylor, we're taking your report very seriously. You mentioned some significant issues with Mr. Anderson. Can you send over any evidence you have?" I clicked through the files on my screen as I spoke. "I'm sending everything we've gathered right now. You'll find evidence of fraudulent transactions, document tampering, and clear violations of attorney-client privilege. We've also got video and digital forensics." There was silence as Davidson took in the files. Then he replied, clearly shocked, "This isn't just a few mistakes. This is criminal-level conspiracy." I agreed, letting him know I trusted the Bar Association to handle it properly. "We're going to call an emergency panel right away," he said. "Mr. Anderson's license could be suspended within the week." I ended the call and made my way to the conference room. Marshall Summers was already there, a stack of documents spread out around him. He was a forensic accountant and knew his stuff when it came to financial fraud. With his wire-rimmed glasses and no-nonsense attitude, Marshall had untangled some of the toughest cases. "Marshall," I said, shaking his hand, "I've been through some of the data already, but I need to see it all laid out." Marshall nodded, showing me a complex web of shell companies and hidden accounts. "Mike's been building this for years," he said, pointing to the screen. "Every time you did a property transfer, he set up a shadow transaction under different names, mostly linked to your wife or other proxies." I looked closely at the screen, following each connection in his diagrams. Marshall pointed to one big section. "If you'd signed these last papers, the ownership of your entire portfolio would have transferred over, clean and irreversible." He gave me a hard look. "But now, we've got enough evidence to prove fraud." Just then, a message came in from my cybersecurity chief. "Full forensic reports done," it read. "Found encrypted communications between Mike and your wife dating back 5 years." I forwarded it to Marshall. "Add that to the evidence pile and get everything ready for the board meeting at 2. Time flew as we worked through the details. By 1:30, my team was in the boardroom, and Mike's usual chair sat empty. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, standing at the head of the table, "today, I have some disturbing news. It will explain why I've called for an immediate audit and the end of all contracts with Anderson and Associates." I took my time presenting the evidence. Every document, every recording, shifted the board members from confusion to outright anger. Gerald Matthews, the head of legal compliance, looked grim. "This kind of exposure puts us all at risk," he said, and I nodded. "We're already reviewing every contract Mike handled," I assured him. I showed the board the security footage from my own home, which captured secret meetings right there in my backyard. Some of them actually winced at the betrayal. Trisha Chun, who'd been with me the longest, whispered, "Your own family, Jake?" I cut her off. "What I need now is a unanimous vote to cut all ties with Anderson and Associates and to pursue legal action." The vote was swift, and everyone agreed. Across town, Mike was sitting in his office, clueless about what was coming. His secretary buzzed in to tell him that the State Bar Association had shown up unannounced. As they entered, he tried to put on a confident face, but that faded when he saw the seriousness in their expressions. The lead investigator spoke firmly. "Mr. Anderson, we have evidence of ethical and possibly criminal misconduct. We'll need access to your computers and client files." "This is ridiculous," Mike blustered. "On whose authority?" They didn't flinch. "We have proof of altered documents, misuse of client funds, and conspiracy to defraud," the investigator said, cold and clear. "Your license is suspended, effective immediately." In the Hamptons, my wife Lisa was hosting a lunch at the tennis club when she got a text from Mike. "The bar is here. They know everything. Jake knows. Delete everything now." Her face went pale as she excused herself from the group. She tried calling me, but I ignored it. My daughter, Emily, appeared in my office doorway that afternoon. She looked shaken, but composed. "Dad, I talked to Thomas's parents. They're worried about the wedding now. What do you think I should do?" I handed her a file. "Read this, Emily, and then decide for yourself." As she went through it, her face fell. "Mom, Mike, Ryan, even Ava? All of them?" "Yes," I said simply. Emily's hands shook, but she straightened up. "I'm postponing the wedding. I need some time to process all of this." "That's your choice," I replied. She nodded, adding, "Thomas's parents need to hear the truth from me, not from the news." I watched her leave, feeling a mix of pride and anger. At least one of my kids had the strength to face this head-on. Moments later, Marshall walked in with a thick binder. "Jake, it's worse than we thought. Mike's been skimming from almost every account he touched." I let myself smile, sharp and cold. "Send it all to the Bar Association and the DA's office. Lisa came to me because you were always too busy with your precious company to notice her. Now, I'm using that company to destroy you." I pressed the intercom. "Security, please escort Mr. Anderson from the building permanently." As Mike was led away, I received a final text from my head of cybersecurity. "Found it. Offshore accounts emptied last week. All money transferred to a private account in his name only. Your wife got played." I savored the satisfaction. They thought I was a fool, too focused on business to see their betrayal. They were about to learn how well business had taught me to handle traitors. The sun set over Manhattan, casting shadows through my office windows. In the darkness, I reviewed Marshall's report, preparing for my counterattack. There would be no compromise, no negotiation, no mercy. They chose their path, and now they would face the consequences. The State Bar Association's hearing room fell silent as the verdict was read. Mike Anderson, once a respected attorney, stood rigid as his career crumbled. In light of overwhelming evidence of fraud, document falsification, and violations of attorney-client privilege, this committee hereby orders the immediate disbarment of Mike Anderson. All documents bearing his signature over the past 5 years are subject to review and potential nullification. I sat in the back row, watching my former friend. His shoulders sagged, and my new legal team, led by Alexander Torres, was already taking notes. "Every fraudulent transfer will be reversed," Torres whispered. Mike's eyes met mine, revealing desperation beneath his charming facade. I held his gaze, unmoved by the silent plea I saw there. Outside the hearing room, reporters clustered like vultures. Mike pushed through them, ignoring questions about client losses. His former law partners had distanced themselves, settling with me rather than risk their firm's destruction. My phone buzzed with a message from my forensic team. Found hidden partition on his laptop. Evidence of embezzlement. Sending details to the DA's office. The next weeks unfolded with precision. My legal team moved swiftly, leveraging Mike's disbarment to unwind years of fraudulent transfers. Properties and assets flowed back into their rightful accounts. In our Hamptons mansion, Lisa received divorce papers. Her attorney, a third-rate lawyer, looked grim. Mrs. Taylor, I must be frank. The evidence against you is overwhelming. You're facing potential criminal charges. But the offshore accounts, Lisa began. Mr. Anderson cleared them out last month, he replied. The funds were traced to a private account in his name. Lisa's facade cracked. That bastard. After everything we planned. Let's focus on damage control, the lawyer cut in sharply. The following day, Ryan and Ava sat in my office, looking less polished than usual. Ryan's designer suit couldn't hide his haunted expression. Ava's law school dreams lie in ruins, he said. Ava's law school acceptance has been rescinded, she added, her voice small. They said my involvement in document fraud makes me unfit for legal education. I study my children, seeing scared young adults facing consequences. You chose Mike over your father, I said. You helped destroy your family for a man who's probably halfway to Mexico by now. Just then, my phone lit up with a news alert. Disgraced attorney Mike Anderson spotted boarding private plane to Mexico City. Ava burst into tears, and Ryan slumped in his chair. We were stupid. We thought. You thought betraying me was clever. I cut him off. You thought wrong. I pulled 2 folders from my desk. Complete these requirements, prove you've learned from this disaster, and I'll consider supporting your education again. Fail, and you're on your own. Emily knocked and entered, carrying herself with quiet dignity. The Hendersons send their regards, she said. They understand postponing the wedding. I nodded. You maintained your integrity, Emily. I'm proud of you. Ryan and Ava couldn't meet her eyes. A year later, I stood at my office window in the Taylor International Tower. The scandal had strengthened my empire. Trust must be earned, I murmured, and betrayal must be answered with the law. Emily touched my arm. You taught us that lesson, Dad. Some of us learned it better than others. I smiled. The price of justice had been high, but I paid it without hesitation. In the end, integrity proved stronger than betrayal. His intercom buzzed. Mr. Taylor, Emily is here with the wedding venue photos. Emily entered, a composed 30-year-old who had become her father's trusted advisor while excelling in her corporate compliance career. Although her wedding to Thomas had been postponed due to the scandal, the day was finally approaching. The Southampton venue is perfect, she said, spreading the photos across his desk. It's small and elegant for our family. She hesitated before adding, I haven't invited Mom. Jake nodded. The mention of Lisa stirred no emotional turmoil. Their lives had diverged since the divorce. Her fall from grace had been as dramatic as his rise. Have you heard the latest about her? Emily asked cautiously. Jake raised an eyebrow. You know I don't keep up with that part of our past. She's working as a receptionist at a dental office in Queens now, Emily informed him. Catherine ran into her at a discount grocery store last week. She said Lisa looked old. Once the queen of Manhattan society, Lisa had hit a new low. Her attempts to rebuild her social circle had spectacularly failed, with every door that once opened now firmly shut. Her last shot at redemption had come 2 years ago when she tried to join a charitable organization in Queens, but a background check revealed her involvement in the fraud scheme, leading to a quiet rejection. Mike Anderson's downfall had been even more severe. Extradited from Mexico and pleading guilty, he was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison for wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. His disbarment was permanent, and his reputation lay in ruins. Sources reported he struggled to adapt to prison life. His polished manners made him a target. Once respected in courtrooms, he now spent his days in protective custody, with only his frustrated legal team visiting. Did you see the notice from the Bar Association? Emily asked, pulling out her tablet. They're using Mike's case for ethics certification. The Taylor Foundation even contributed to the curriculum. Jake smiled. Justice had a certain poetry to it. After the scandal, Ryan and Ava had taken different paths. Ryan had left law behind, now working in construction management for one of Jake's subsidiaries. He's actually good at this. Better than he ever was at law, Emily noted. Ava had taken longer to find her footing. Her rescinded law school acceptance shattered her confidence, but her volunteer work at legal aid gave her fresh perspective. Now, she ran a nonprofit supporting victims of white-collar crime, partially funded by the Taylor Foundation. Her organization is partnering with 3 more universities, Emily continued. She's turned her mistake into something meaningful. Jake had imposed strict conditions on his support: complete transparency, regular ethics training, and performance metrics. Trust could only be rebuilt through consistent actions. The door opened again, and Alexandra Torres, Jake's chief legal counsel, walked in. "The European acquisition is complete," she reported, "and we just acquired Mike Anderson's old law firm's building. Their partners accepted our offer." The irony was exquisite. Mike's former law partners had never recovered from the scandal, and their once prestigious firm had collapsed. The building would become the Taylor Foundation's new headquarters. "Have the foundation send them an invitation to our next ethics symposium," Jake suggested, satisfied. Alexandra smiled. "Already done." They declined, citing prior commitments. A text from his head of security popped up. Lisa attempted to access her old country club membership, claiming a misunderstanding. When rejected, she left in tears. Meanwhile, Mike had requested another prison transfer, again denied. Jake archived the message. Their suffering brought him no pleasure, just the natural consequence of their choices. As Thomas Henderson, Emily's fiancé, arrived, Jake recognized the loyalty he had shown during the scandal. They discussed the upcoming wedding, with Emily choosing the same Hamptons estate where the betrayal had been discovered, a testament to her resilience. Later that afternoon, at the Taylor Foundation, the walls were lined with case studies, including Mike Anderson's downfall. Jake's last meeting of the day revealed the foundation's growth, with requests from law schools across the country. Their story had become a case study in ethics. Jake thought of Ava's rescinded acceptance and learned that Henderson Law School had adopted the full curriculum. The sun set over Manhattan as Jake reviewed plans for his next acquisition. The past was settled, justice served, and the future stretched before him, bright with possibility. Trust, once broken, could never be fully restored, but wisdom earned through betrayal could build something far greater than what was lost.